What it do? Welcome to another new episode of Locked On Bucks. On today's show, for the fifth time in 34 games, the Bucks have played the Pacers. And unfortunately for the Bucks, for the fourth time, the Bucks have lost. Tonight, the score happened to be 142-130 in favor of the Pacers, and the Bucks kept it close in the first half, but things changed in the third. So we're going to talk a bit about what flipped in that critical quarter for the Bucks. Also, do the Pacers pose a possible matchup problem for the Bucks if they were to meet in the playoffs? Plus, a look ahead to Spurs and Bucks, which takes place tomorrow. All of that and more coming up on today's episode of Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Camille Davis, and you can catch me weekly on the Technical Foul Podcast, as well as Cheesehead TV's Carry the G and MKE. Joining me is longtime voice of the pod and founder of BrewHoop.com, Frank Madden. We truly do appreciate you tuning in, and thank you to everybody for making Locked On Bucks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. You can also catch the show on YouTube as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So make sure you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Now, as I mentioned, this is another Pacers win, another Bucks loss. Happens to be the fifth straight victory for the Pacers. They're second over the Bucks in 3 days now. Now, the Bucks were able to drop 130 points on the Pacers, but that wasn't enough because the Bucks happened to give up 147 points to the Pacers. And like I mentioned, the first half was close. Both teams were shooting the ball well. Bucks cooled off in that third quarter, and the Pacers didn't. They pulled away with a crazy third quarter, 47 points. They were plus 18 in that quarter, with the Bucks only scoring 29 points. And that was a real turning point tonight.
Yeah, I mean, first half, I think Bucks kind of went back and forth and, had, I don't know if they led by as many as seven, but, had 3 5 point lead, kind of go to halftime up a couple. But again, it was kind of, just sort of shootout mentality between these two teams. I mean, the funny part is I think the biggest adjustment, was we saw Chris Middleton defending Tyrese Halliburton for extended stretches, to start the game. We saw kind of continued sort of switching approach taken by the Bucks to at least take away kind of just the traditional sort of pick and roll actions where, Tyrese has been able to get, Miles Turner in particular in some of the earlier games, just kind of a layup line or, his own little floaters. So, they were able to take away some of that just by tactically how they approach things. And again, I think Chris has looked a lot sprier defensively for the last week or two, but it just doesn't matter when, there's so many other kind of weaknesses to attack. And this was a night where, the Bucks got lucky. Have been lucky through a lot of the series this year as far as the Pacers not getting really hot from three. And tonight they weren't scorching from three, but they didn't shoot 5 of 35 like they did two nights ago, when they gifted the Bucks at least a chance in that game by shooting so poorly from three. And this was a night where Tyrese Halliburton was hitting sidestep threes and hitting those kind of deep shots. And again, I think the Bucks were trying to, when I looked at the way Middleton was just sort of trying to stay down and not bite on, kind of all the hesitation moves and kind of in and out stuff that he was trying to do when he was, kind of sizing Chris up and figuring out if he was going to drive or not. So didn't feel like, they gave up as much in terms of him necessarily getting the basket, but the three-point shot was there. He was 5 of 11 from three. And, he was kind of contained in the first half. I think he had, I want to say 10 points in the first half. But then eventually, just kind of started cooking and, just felt like every time the Pacers tried to run, I mean, it's kind of a similar story to what we've seen all year. They could just always get, a good look. And I thought even when the Bucks went to the zone in that third quarter for stretches, they always seem to find kind of a soft spot, 10 to 15 feet out. And, Bruce Brown never misses floaters or, 14-foot intermediate jump shots. So they were able to kind of just continually punish them. So, yeah, I mean, the Bucks, when you lose 4 or 5, it's because the other team is just pretty soundly outplayed you. You needed a 64-point game from Giannis to win your one game. And I think tonight, again, you just saw the Pacers are just a bad matchup. I think because it really accentuates some of the Bucks' worst habits and some of their, fundamental flaws and weaknesses, especially from a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, you said that really, really well. And one thing that the Bucks were doing a pretty decent job of, at least in the first half, was limiting the Pacers in those fast break points. If my notes were correct, I believe that they only had 5 fast break points in the first half, did the Pacers, but they were able to finish the game with 21 fast break points. So they were able to get quite a few more of those in the second half. You already mentioned the defense. We got to talk about the bench, unfortunately. Again, I feel like it's the same conversation a lot of the times with this team. And as you mentioned, the Pacers do tend to emphasize some of the Bucks' weak points. Tonight, the Bucks lost the battle of the benches again, 59-38. That brings the season total that the Bucks lost, and the numbers just astonishing to look at. The Pacers bench over the 5 games this regular season scored 255 points, while the Milwaukee Bucks bench scored 124 points. That's not going to cut it, especially over the last 2 games here that we've seen this week in 2024 with the Pacers and how they're playing Giannis. They were quick to double team him. They were really trying to force the ball out of his hand to see if anybody else could beat them. And Giannis had a season low against the Pacers tonight with 26 points, and it didn't help that Dame really couldn't find his shot tonight. He was getting good looks, and at certain points in the second half, you could literally see his body language just getting really frustrated with the shots not falling for him. And when Dame's unable to make his shots, we're able to hold Malik Beasley to 8 points when Bobby Portis gives you 9. It's really hard to win a game in that way.
Yeah, I mean, and again, kind of as you mentioned, 3-point shooting was actually pretty solid for the Bucks tonight, right? 14 out of 37, 38%. It's about an average 3-point shooting night. I think they put up about a 122 offensive rating, right? So, offensively, even though in that third quarter it felt like the offense was just couldn't keep up with what the Pacers were doing. But again, that's really more of a defensive problem than necessarily the offense. So, again, disappointing from Dame. He did end up kind of got his numbers when you look at, whatever it was, 23 points on 18 shots, just 6 out of 18, but did get to the foul line a fair bit, 5 assists and 3 steals. But again, like, when you look at what Halliburton was doing on the other side, he was clearly the better guard between the kind of 2 starting point guards, the 2 all-stars. And so, again, Halliburton's just kind of owned them this year. And, they were rubbing it in, right? I mean, they were kind of laughing at the Bucks' expense and rubbing in their faces. And, I don't really particularly, I mean, you can get mad about it, right? Because it's not fun when the other team is doing that. But, when they just beat you 4 out of 5, they can say what they want, if you want to do something about it, play some defense.
Yep.
Well, we know the Bucks aren't going to do that. So you're just going to have to take the medicine. And, again, we'll see if there's another matchup with these guys down the road in the playoffs. But, again, at this point, you're 23-6 against the rest of the league and 1-4 against the Indiana Pacers. So again, just sort of, I think, speaks to the problems the Bucks have with the matchups. And, I think, again, the Bucks, they play a bunch of guards that don't defend. And that's not a recipe for success against this version of the Indiana Pacers for sure.
Yeah, and like we mentioned, with this loss, the Bucks have now lost the season series to the Pacers, 1-4 with the scheduling quirk of them playing 5 times this season, thanks to the in-season tournament. And if these 2 teams did meet in the playoffs, which isn't out of the realm of possibility, the Pacers are currently slotted in that 6th seed, I believe, and the Bucks are the 2nd seed. But lots of movement will occur between now and the end of the season. So if they were to meet, do the Pacers pose a serious matchup problem against the Bucks, and would you actually be nervous to see them play? I want to dive into that next. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. The most common phrase you tend to hear to start a new year happens to be "New Year, New Me." But what if we were to think about the opposite of that? What are some things that you want to keep the same about yourself or your life in 2024? What are you already crushing it at? See, around New Year's, we tend to get obsessed with how to change ourselves instead of just expanding on what we already are doing correctly. So maybe you finally organize one part of your space and you want to tackle another. Or maybe you're taking your supplements every morning and now you want to actually eat breakfast too. See, therapy can help you find your strengths so you can ditch the extreme resolutions and make changes that actually stick. Therapy isn't just for those who have experienced major trauma. It's something that can empower you to be the best version of yourself. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched up with a licensed therapist. You can also switch therapists at any time for no additional charge in case the first one isn't the right fit for you. So celebrate the progress that you've already made and visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Bucks. Special shout out to the everydayers who tune in to us Monday through Friday. We appreciate it. If you haven't checked out the Wednesday show from this week, where Justin ran solo, just kind of breaking down the Bucks defense and where they are, would highly encourage you to do so. A great episode where he digs into the numbers. And if you enjoy that or what we do here with the post-game shows or any other Locked On Bucks show, I got to put you up on Locked On Sports Today, because Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And Locked On Sports is going to keep you covered with 24 coverage of all the top stories of the day. It's brought to you by the local experts of Locked On. Plus, you get our national shows that cover every league as well. So make sure you head over to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. As mentioned, Bucks Pacers hasn't gone in the Bucks' favor so far this season. If these two teams were to meet in the playoffs, Frank, do you have any matchup concerns with the Pacers? Because one thing that's so interesting to me about this matchup with these two teams is that it truly is a battle of the offenses, right? The Pacers' best offense in the league right now, I believe, 122.9 offensive rating. They have a 59% effective field goal percentage. Meanwhile, the Bucks also have the offensive firepower with 121.3 offensive rating, 57.8 effective field goal. So the question with the matchup is, will the Bucks be able to get enough stops if they were to see each other?
I mean, I would definitely be nervous about this version of the Bucks team, but I mean, to be honest, like after last year, I mean, say what you will about the Heat, being not a normal 8 seed. Going through that experience, I think pretty much meant that I would never feel confident going into a first round playoff series again, because you just never know what can go wrong, right? We saw that Giannis goes down in the first game last year, and then the fourth quarter meltdowns in the last 2 games of that Heat series. So I don't think it, especially with this version of the Bucks and the fact that you know they haven't shown that they can play consistent defense really kind of for any sustained period, especially I think in a playoff setting and against this team specifically. Um, as you said, they really just are going to be a team that tries to outscore you. I think if you're talking about a Pacers matchup, and I think again I think it was more obvious to me in the game on Tuesday, but it does feel like so often the Bucks are even like, and it was really noticeable in the fourth quarter, but the Bucks are afraid to play fast against Indiana because they're afraid of their transition defense being turned against them. And so now you have to score, 130, 135 tonight. You needed 143 points if you're going to win this game. Now you're having to do that against a set defense because you're so afraid of getting out in transition yourself, right? So it's definitely again, as much as the Bucks have shown they can score on the Pacers, it does feel like, again, like the Bucks have to be so careful and so mindful of the Pacers' ability to attack them in space and on transition, whether it's off of misses or makes. That again, they just always seem to be kind of on the back foot, and with the exception of when Giannis has had these kind of massive outings, they've obviously not been able to get it done. And I thought Giannis played it well tonight. He was, especially early on, didn't take a shot until like the last couple
4
seconds of the
seconds
first
left.
quarter. Yeah, when he went kind of patented attacking, driving layup. But I thought he was patient, and the Bucks kind of swung the ball around when the Pacers doubled. And obviously they were able to put up a their average, 123 offensive rating or whatever they ended up with. So it's not like the offense was the problem per se. And if Dame plays, an average game, then you probably feel a lot better about the Bucks offense. But once again, it was Chris and Giannis that were the guys you could kind of count on. And if there's one kind of silver lining of the last like week, right, when obviously the Bucks lose on Christmas and then lose both these games to the Pacers, it is the fact that Chris Middleton continues to look much better, and I think it's looking better on both sides of the ball. And again, bad sign for the Bucks that Chris Middleton has to be the answer in defending Tyrese Halliburton. Like that to me is sort of like, indicative, not indicative of the Bucks have found some sort of solution, but indicative of the fact that, the other two smalls that they play to start, have been pretty much pylons. And again, we just see it tonight, right? It's just too many possessions where, a guy attacks a closeout and there's no resistance, right? It's just a blow by, and you're just always putting your bigs under pressure to try to, protect the rim. And when guys just have free runs from the perimeter at the paint, you're never going to be a good defense. Like, no matter how much rim protection you have, you're never going to be a great defense or even a good one if you're that weak at the point of attack. And I think we just again saw a lot of that, and even the breakdowns. Like there was this play, and one of the mistakes Chris definitely made was, got caught off ball, kind of sleeping. Halliburton cuts back door. I think Beasley ends up fouling him for a 3-point play in the fourth quarter. Again, you just have to always be on when you're defending a Pacer team that attacks this relentlessly. And, when they don't shoot horrendously from 3-point range,
right.
then yeah, it's going to be a problem. I mean, hey, Camille, silver lining, the Bucks defensive rebound rate was actually like pretty decent tonight. They, actually had a better offensive rebound rate than the other guys, which is a rare breath of fresh air given how bad they've been on the glass. But again, I don't know if you've got the points in the paint numbers in front of you right now, but I don't know that did they get 70 again, Camille?
No, it
I
was
felt like it was
64.
less.
Pacers
Okay,
had 64, Bucks had 60.
Still very bad.
Yeah.
64 is still horrendous. I think it's like 67 was what the Bucks were allowing on average over the last like 4 games or so. So yeah, I mean, again, like the defense has been bad. I mean, the personnel is problematic. I have no faith that Adrian Griffin suddenly is going to figure out some eureka and get these guys to play, really good defense. And, I think one of the things about December, like the defensive numbers look better, but they were wildly lucky in terms of teams missing 3-pointers. And, again, those 2 straight games, what were the Cavs and Pacers shot 11 for 78, and you only win one of the 2 games, I think was sort of indicative of just the fact that that defense was, getting propped up by some unsustainable opponent shooting. So again, the Pacers are a funhouse mirror, right? In terms of what they can do offensively. Again, not a lot of defenses are going to look good against the Indiana Pacers. So I had very low expectations of this game. But again, we just saw like, if you're thinking like, oh well, the Bucks will defend when it matters and they'll be able to get some stops, blah 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 in the fourth quarter. It's like, yeah, they got a few stops, but it's like they got to whatever it was
Could have
down.
gone 10 in the fourth.
Yeah, they got it down to like 9, 10 point or like 10, 11, 12 points, something like that, right? And Malik Beasley, Dame both had pretty good looks at threes that might have made the game a little more uncomfortable, but they missed, and again, like that's just the pressure you put on yourself when you play defense like this, right? You just put so much pressure on offense to not make mistakes, and obviously they ultimately did make mistakes, and same old story, right? We've been kind of refraining a lot of the same things over and over again in terms of the issues they've had against the Pacers. So yeah, I don't think the Bucks are going to want to see the Pacers in the playoffs. But who knows, right? Bucks are probably look like a team that is not going to hang on to the 2 seed a whole lot longer if they keep playing like this. So all of a sudden, 3-6 seed, Camille.
See?
There you go. First round matchup, Pacers and Bucks, and we'll see if Tyrese Halliburton can keep talking as much smack as he has these last couple of games, but as long as he's winning, he can keep talking, I guess.
Hey, that's what you do when you up. You can talk that talk. So he's earned that right. The Pacers have earned that right at this point. And it was interesting during this game, the fact that the mics were so loud, you could hear a lot of the player chatter tonight. And the guys were definitely letting each other hear it. You can tell there's that energy there, which for as much energy as it was in this game, like it still is a game at the beginning of January. I do wonder once the playoffs start if the Bucks are going to be able to lock in consistently throughout a game. And like the small sample size says, like they haven't given me a reason to think that. At this moment, it's just being optimistic, saying like, "Hey, we've seen the Bucks in the playoffs before. We know what they can do, but we haven't seen this particular team." And when I'm thinking about a Bucks Pacers matchup, there's also the coaching aspect of it. And this isn't me saying like Griff's a bad coach, but it is me saying that Rick Carlisle, like Carlisle has a lot of coaching experience. Like this is not a new situation for him. You saw it, I think, as well in this mini season series against the Bucks with the changes that the Pacers did make throughout the course of these 5 games. We saw Griff do a couple different things, having, Giannis switching on to Turner and being able to try to be more active on the switches and things of that sort, but didn't really pan out. Tonight, we saw more Giannis. We saw Giannis at the 5, which we haven't seen in quite some time. They were able to get some stops with that lineup, but weren't able to, unfortunately, score the buckets. And I do wonder, like, when Jay Crowder comes back, is that a look that we see a bit more often with that Giannis at the small ball 5? Did enjoy seeing Ajax kind of play that role a little bit tonight. We normally see him more of that guard, but with his intelligence and seeing how he played, it was interesting seeing him as a big as well. So I don't know. The Pacers, I wouldn't say that I'd be like scared, but they give me some pause after what we've seen so far in the regular season. And if the Bucks roll out the same roster today in the playoffs that we have seen against this Pacer team, the Bucks are really going to have to prove it in that series, because the Pacers fans are going to come in. The Pacers themselves are going to come in with a lot of confidence because they've done it before. They're not scared of the Bucks, and that's an aspect of it to consider as well. So it'll be interesting. We might see it. We might not, but
Yeah, I think pointing out the Giannis center lineups is important because again, there's gonna be nights where playing Brook in a drop isn't gonna
not going to
be
work.
the answer, right? I mean, we saw them close basically every game of the finals when they won a championship with Giannis playing essentially the 5 with PJ, Chris, um, Pat, and Drew, right? That was pretty much your closing 5 in most of those games. And I think missing Jay has limited what they can do just because they don't have enough kind of in between size guys. I think Andre, even though he's tended to guard small guys, he's obviously strong and athletic. I would have liked to see Marjan play a role in that fourth quarter, switch
Yeah, he had a good
everything
game.
group, because I think Marjan, I do want to talk a little bit about him. I think, you know, Andre was, I think, what, plus 12, plus 14 tonight, but that is a very rare. I mean, very rare to do that in a game you lose by a lot. But I mean, Andre generally, like the Bucks, always get outscored when he's on the floor, and I'm not saying it's because he's bad or like doesn't give them something. I've obviously talked a lot about why I think they have to figure out how to get him more involved, just because of at least what he can theoretically do defensively and
Mm-hmm.
how much they're lacking in that regard. But it is interesting. It does feel like I'm again, I don't always have to put those two guys in competition with each other, but I think it is hard to see more than one of Andre and Marjan probably having major roles when things kind of push comes to shove. If knock on wood you're actually healthy, and obviously people like Jay come back. But yeah, and I thought Marjan gave them a nice boost tonight offensively. He looked
Absolutely.
good. Um, again, he's not going to solve all your problems defensively by any stretch. But he's not small. And, I think especially, one of his biggest issues is getting over screens. So if you're in a lineup where you're switching everything anyway, then that mitigates some of the concerns you have about Marjan and some of the kind of challenges with getting over screens. But let's be honest, pick a name out of a hat. Like you can say the guy sucks at getting over a screen if he's on the Bucks, right? Like the Bucks have anybody that can get over a screen? Like not really, right? When Javon and Drew left, that skill set pretty much went out the window. Um, so yeah, we'll see. But I think Andre had some better moments tonight. He got clowned by TJ McConnell a couple times on Tuesday. They contained TJ Connell,
They
Camille.
did.
Only
Bucks
6
kill it.
points for TJ McConnell. That should be all that you need to win a game against Indiana. Is keep TJ McConnell under 18 points on 80% shooting. So so hey, yay. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting with Griff. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, he's not a good coach at this point. I mean, he's a rookie. He's been around a long time, but he's a rookie coach. Like the deck is stacked against you as is, and I don't think again like what the Bucks do well. Dame and Giannis and Chris Middleton. Like I don't think Adrian Griffin taught those guys how to play offense. Like I think those guys, have figured this stuff out. I don't think coaching has a ton to do that. I think it's more about just kind of getting out of the way. It did feel like Giannis was setting a ton of screens tonight in the last few games, which I think that's a positive thing. It was interesting that the screening for Giannis for Dame actually dropped in December, even though their efficiency has been going up. And I think I saw one stat today that they're first in the league now in terms of points per play in pick and roll. So they tried to do it a lot tonight. Obviously the Pacers just showed so much attention to Giannis. It was, it wasn't like they were going to just spam that and get Giannis a bunch of dunks. That's just not how it works. But yeah, I mean, as far as like Adrian Griffin and, it's like, a lot of like my concerns about Adrian Griffin are not so much like, I mean, whenever it gets focused on like adjustments, like, oh, what are the adjustments they're going to make? And it's like, I feel like for the most part, like, people don't pick up on a lot of the adjustments that teams make, right? It's almost like with Bud, it's like as long as they were playing drop, like people just like thought of it as like, well, there's been no adjustment because they're still playing Brook Lopez in a drop. I mean, and we've seen them try to do different things against the Pacers. Obviously, we've seen periods of zone. We've seen periods now with Chris, with Beasley. Obviously, I don't think they've ever really tried to put Lillard on Halliburton, but we've seen them try to kind of throw different looks at them. We've seen them try to, double him at times. We've seen them, again, kind of do some different things. But, what makes him great is that he figures it out, right? He's a problem solver. All the great players are. And I think at the end of the day, no matter what you're doing from an adjustments perspective, if your team has bad habits and personnel that isn't great defensively, you're probably not going to ever be good defensively, right? Like there's only kind of so much you can do. I think having like kind of the core principles and system is like a big part of it. That was obviously a Bud strength, right? The low hanging fruit guys kind of just knew what they were doing. I thought transition wise, they were really good and disciplined. I see a lot of that has gone out the window with this version of the Bucks, but again, they also don't have the same personnel. And I think, it's interesting. I do kind of wonder, like if you had Javon Carter instead of Campaign, I'm not saying that like solves all your problems, but I think especially the challenges the Bucks have had defensively with their second units, I do think it would be really helpful to have a defensive oriented backup point guard. But instead you have, again, another guy who's offense first and has problems defensively, right? You go from Damian Lillard to Campaign. Malik Beasley has to be your freaking stopper, right? And it's kind of funny. It's like people talk about like teams hunting Dame. It's like they don't have to hunt Dame.
They can hunt any guard.
Exactly. Like when Halliburton sees Malik Beasley, it's not like he's Same thing. Oh man, I need to get a switch on this guy, right? Like they're running pick and roll because they want to, that puts defense on its heels. But like, it's not again, Dame's not being hunted mercilessly. And I think as long as Malik Beasley's in the starting five, hey, Dame's probably enjoying it. Yeah, Dame's probably, it's good. Probably Dame probably doesn't mind it because it means that like teams feel like, well, whatever, Dame's over there, but we don't even need to work that hard to put pressure on them because we can just attack Malik and they're putting him right in front of us, just serving up that barbecue chicken. But
lots of barbecue chicken and lots of L's to this team. I'm sure that Bucks fans would agree. We're glad to not have to see the Pacers anymore this season. Again, 5 matchups in 34 games. That's a lot of the same team very early on. But I know this L has left a lot of bad taste in everyone's mouth, I'm sure, with the Bucks players themselves. But luckily, they won't have to wait too long to get back at it because they have the Spurs tomorrow on the second night of a back-to-back. So let's quickly take a look at that matchup right after this. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there is still time for you to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sport book. So right now, new customers can get $100 $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. I'm gonna run that back just to make sure you heard me clearly, because that's $150 in bonus bets whether you win or lose. The app is super easy to use and there's a lot of different ways for you to bet. You can explore live same game parlays. You can check out find bets in the new Explore tab. You can even make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, which is the best way to find popular parlays already made for you. And there's a lot more within that FanDuel app. So make sure you visit fanduel.com/locked on and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. Bucks Spurs coming up on the second night of a back-to-back for the Bucks. Bucks won the last matchup against the Spurs 132-119. Of course, there was no Victor Wembanyama in that matchup. So hopefully we do finally get to see Giannis versus Wemby in this upcoming game. But let's be honest. I know the Bucks are on the second night of a back-to-back with this game, but the Spurs are not a good team. They rank, bottom of the league in just about every major team statistic. And they have, like I mentioned, 5-28 record. They went on a 18-game losing streak at one point in this season, and they're 2-8 in their last matchup. At this point of the recording, we're not exactly sure who is going to be playing for the Milwaukee Bucks on the second night of a back-to-back. Will we see Chris Middleton? Who knows? We haven't seen him on back-to-back so far this season, but I think it still might be somewhat safe to say that this is an opportunity for the Bucks to try to get back on track against a team that just hasn't been playing good basketball.
Yeah, and I think to the point, as you said, like who's going to play. I mean, Chris Middleton was questionable tonight with right knee injury management and a sore left wrist. That wrist, that is the one that was surgically repaired, not this past summer, but the summer before that, which caused him was part of the reason why he missed the start of the 22-23 season. So again, another reason why it was good to see him out there looking pretty comfortable, shooting the ball pretty easily. I even had a couple of lefty finishes. So I was like, oh, okay, good. He's still using that left hand in spite of whatever wrist injury might be bugging him. So we'll see. I mean, nominally, Camille, like since Chris made an all-star, I think the whole resting rules thing, I think the Bucks, in theory, if Chris was just healthy and they rested him tomorrow night, because it's a national TV game and because Chris, I think it's like 3 years back, I think they said look at all-stars, like if you were
He's
an all-star
considered a
within
star.
within the last 2-3 years. Obviously there hasn't been an all-star game this year, so you go back 2 years, he was an all-star. I believe that they could be fined if he didn't play tomorrow, but again, like with injury stuff, I think they can always sort of get out of it. But certainly I expect Giannis and Dame to play, especially coming off this loss. Again, you kind of hope that they want to get back on the right track, and the Spurs have been it's interesting. The two highest paid coaches in the basketball, Monty Williams, and I feel like a lot of people miss the fact that Pop got a bigger contracts extension right after Monty did. So I think Pop is rumored to be making like $16 million a year, I think. And they've been two of the arguably the worst coaches in basketball this year. Pop, because he insists on playing, or he has been insisting previously on playing Jeremy Sohan as a point guard, even though he's not. Malachi Branham, I believe, started the last game. I think they've at least started to vaguely look like a team normal lineup now with Keldon Johnson coming off the bench, but they're still not starting Trey Jones, who's like the one obvious guy to start. So we'll see. And Victor is now playing center, which, has always felt like inevitability, but also meant that, you had Zach Collins starting, and that kind of created like a bit of weirdness because then you had this kind of musical chairs issue with who else was starting. So, I mean, the Spurs are very bad. They're very bad defensively. They're bad at pretty much everything. But they do have talent. They're not to me, they're not like the Pistons who just have no kind of like guys who are really ready other than like maybe Cade and Boyan. The Spurs have enough talent. I mean, the Bucks lost to them, was it a year ago or 2 years ago? I mean, I remember they lost in San Antonio pretty badly, at least once in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago.
And so again, like I don't think you can take anything for granted, especially on the second night of a back-to-back. So Bucks are gonna have to come out and play the dudes that are in front of them, and hopefully you do to them what everybody else has been doing and put them in their place. And obviously, I think Wemby versus Giannis is a fun matchup. We'll see how much they perhaps match up 1v1. And obviously, if you're Giannis, you're looking to use your strength hopefully against Victor. But Victor, I think, is slightly ahead of Brooke now in terms of the NBA shot blocking lead. So we know that with all that length, and especially now playing center, I think he's been around the ball a bit more. So we'll see. Obviously, hopefully the Giannis Vic matchup is one we'll see for years to come. But hopefully Giannis can at least keep the rookie, hold the rookie off, for the time being. I know he's been very complimentary of kind of his skill set and all that. So I don't, again, it seems like there's mutual respect there. And Victor, I think, I want to say Victor, I don't know if I heard something about like him having a Giannis jersey at some point or what, but I mean, again, it does seem like those two guys respect each other, even though this would be the first time that they're going to play one another.
It should be fun. This is the game that is not going to be broadcast on Bally, Wisconsin. It is a national TV game on TNT, 6:30 p.m. tip-off Central Time. So make sure you guys check that out. And that'll do it for us today. We'll be back tomorrow, of course, for a post-game show about this Spurs-Bucks matchup. Let us know in the comments on YouTube, if you're watching on YouTube here, if the Pacers make you nervous as a playoff matchup. I'm really curious about this. So would love to know what you guys think. So let us know in the YouTube comments. And also make sure you go and check out Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. For Frank and myself, we'll catch you later.